and welcome back to the Inclusion Solution Live podcast. I'm Gabby Gonzalez, here live in the studio with founder and CEO of the Winters Group, Mary Frances Winters, and we're here to co-host a deeper dive into our new book, Racial Justice at Work, Practical Solutions for Systemic Change. Today, we have one of our esteemed co-authors, Rochelle Younan-Montgomery, who is here to discuss her chapter on accountability through restorative dialogue. Rochelle, we're just going to check in like we normally do at our meetings. How are you entering today?
Good. My heart feels a little heavy just in kind of reflecting and gearing up to talk about accountability. But really happy to be just with the two of you and having this conversation. It feels exciting.
Thank you. Mary Frances, how about you?
Checking in really well, today. And as Rochelle said, it's good to be with both of you. And it's good to have the opportunity to share with our listeners the different aspects of our book, the different topics in our book, and the different perspectives from our authors. So Rochelle, tell us about you. Tell us more about yourself, your background, who you are, and also tell us what was the impetus for you to write the chapter that you did on restorative dialogue.
Yeah, thank you. So I grew up in Minnesota, and I moved to California for over a decade and recently moved back to the Twin Cities. I live in South Minneapolis on Dakota land. Some of the identities I hold, mixed race, woman, cisgender, queer. My mother's white, my father is Egyptian, and he immigrated to the US in the 70s. First generation college graduate. I'm a mother. I have two daughters, a 1-year-old and a 6-year-old. And I'm straight sized. That's a term I learned recently. I'm 5'2.5", not the shortest member of our team, but I thought I was. We had a height challenge.
That's me.
And yeah, I think those are the most kind of important aspects of my identity I want to share. And then my why for the chapter is that I've been in so many work settings where we just haven't done a very good job of being honest, being truthful, having hard conversations when we need to, correct injustice and repair harm. And I think working relationships, human relationships, any relationship really involves rupture and repair. And it's sort of this cycle that's normal. Things might happen where we cause harm, and then we have a choice to move toward healing and repair, or to, bury the pain and sort of move on in a way that's rooted in dysfunction and causing harm and trauma. So I think I've seen it modeled really well, and I've seen times and experienced situations where accountability is like a dirty word, and we don't want to be accountable to ourselves or one another. And I've just seen how much harm that's caused. And so that's my why.
Wow. Yeah. And we see that not only in the workplace, right? We see that in our personal lives as well, right? Where people cause harm and they don't know how to have the conversation to repair it. And so it gets left unsaid. And so I see the parallels to what you talked about from a workplace perspective, because we learn behaviors, and those behaviors that we learn in our personal life, we carry over into our work life as well. Yeah, so that's really powerful.
So true. And then you layer on top of that racial justice. Given that, what does racial justice mean to you, Rochelle? And how do you see that factoring into these conversations?
Yeah, as I was thinking about this, for me, I think racial justice really means that white folks and non-Black people of color are crystal clear in the ways that we perpetuate colorism, anti-Black racism, and harm, both historically and moment to moment. And so I have to share a story about this. So recently I was in a client session where we were talking about the term cultural competence, and there's someone, a cis white man, kind of in the back of the room, like sharing that, what does this have to do with me, essentially? Like, what, a lot of distancing, a lot of, well, those people in Afghanistan, for instance, not allowing young girls to read is just plain wrong. And so I have to, I've got some moral absolutes that I think are actually really important. And so in the process of that, there were women of color in the group, including the, facilitator, who he was interrupting constantly, right? And so in the way that he was showing up, it sort of became clear, like, oh, we're causing harm unknowingly. And the pain of, I think, recognizing and getting curious about that is sometimes for folks unbearable, to the point where they want to just point the finger, right? And I've done that in my own life. Like, there have been many times that instead of leaning in with curiosity or with a sense of humility, it's been more about, protecting my ego, or, wanting to ground into my goodness. And so, oh, well, if I'm a good person, then I must not, be racist or have, anti-Black racism within how I'm socialized. And so I think what I'm craving and wanting to hear more of in the work we do is just a sense of loving accountability for oneself, of like getting clear, like, all right, I messed up, and I'm going to develop some shame resilience in myself to first admit, right, to tell the truth to myself and acknowledge, like, I messed up, I caused harm. Take time with that, slow down, right? Like, grieve, feel the pain, but recognize the pain you feel in that moment pales in comparison to the pain that the Black community is feeling, right? Like, we have no idea. I have no idea. And so to have some humility, like, the pain I'm feeling about the shame and the, whatever I just did to mess up, that's real and valid, but should never, come at the cost of centering, or be about centering my own discomfort or my own experience, if that makes sense. So I was thinking a lot about that.
So in your chapter, you actually provide some very specific skills, some very specific models of ways to have conversations. Would you like to tell us about some of those, and perhaps how you've used them, and the success that you've had?
So a model that's helpful is called Open the Front Door. O stands for observe. So you're naming and noticing a reality of a situation. For example, I might say, hey, I'm noticing my colleagues being interrupted in this conversation pretty frequently. So that's the first step. Just name and notice, something everyone can agree on. T is what you think about it. So T stands for think. So then you'd say, you'd share what you think. So maybe it's, I think it would be really beneficial to hear everybody's perspective in this conversation without interruption. So then that's the second part. The third part is OTF, feel, right? Your emotion, how you feel about it. So rather than leading with the emotion, we have a few steps before that. So then it's how you feel. So you might say, I'm feeling really frustrated. This is happening. And then the last part is D, which is desire. What is your desire or your request moving forward? How can we make it right? How can the other person make it right? And so getting clear about that is important. So then D would be, I'd like to request that we all go around and share equally moving forward. Would everyone be okay with that? So it's a simple framework, I think, especially when there's heightened emotion, when it's scary, when it's maybe new territory, maybe there's some power dynamics at play that could have real consequences. So it's more a tool to use in situations, I think, as you start out, maybe lower stakes situations outside of work. Maybe it's in your in a relationship, friendship, community faith, community, different settings that don't have like a paycheck attached to it necessarily. But then, right, as you start to get some familiarities, build some muscle memory, and practice the skill of like getting clear with yourself about your desires and your needs and your truth, beginning to practice that maybe with your peers at work, and going from there, right? Getting a sense for sort of the appetite for those kinds of conversations. It may not go well, right? Like that's a reality. It may result in some awkwardness. You may not have your desire met. But then there's another layer of a skill that's important, is to develop the sort of self-love and regulation skills to move through it, right? Like other people aren't going to fix our pain or our trauma. We can make a request for that, but to get clear with yourself, like, okay, that either went the way I wanted it to or it didn't. What are the tools and resources I have now to move toward my own healing, outside of someone else's response? Yeah.
Wow, that's great. Taking care of yourself, making sure you're attending to your own well-being in the situation, because it can be stressful and traumatic, for you to even have to feel that you have to use that model, not knowing how the other person might respond. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes me wonder, like, is there? I love the emphasis on the self work. I'm wondering if there's anything that you can do to kind of lay the groundwork interpersonally.
Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to share, so this idea of telling the truth no matter what, including telling the truth to yourself. So I'm reading a book right now called The Way of Integrity by Martha Beck. She was Oprah's life coach for many years. And she challenges readers to try this out for a week where you tell the truth, even including things like white lies, where we don't even tell a white lie. Like we just practice and in small ways. And so I think of that through the lens of compassionate truth telling or loving accountability, and getting clear internally first before we start practicing it with other people. That includes our preferences, our traumas, our confusion. If a microaggression just happened, for instance, just clarifying within yourself, like what even was that? So often we don't even know what just happened. It's like quick, right? It's in the midst of a work conversation or moving through, trying to be productive, but it's this like catches you off guard. Or if you're someone who said a thing and caused harm, getting clear with yourself, like, I think I just messed up there. Like, I think I just said something like that doesn't sit right in my gut, in my body. Something's happening. I don't know what. And like, take a minute with yourself, right? Like move away from the computer, grab a pen and paper, write down what the heck just even happened. Like breathe, feel what you're feeling, take a minute, right? Take a
pause, walk. Right? Pause.
Yeah. Exactly. Like just slow down, right? I think that's where mindfulness can be useful in our work. And so kind of, Gabby, to your point, that self-work, I wrote a blog about this as well on our website of Resma Menachem, talking about the difference between clean pain and dirty pain, and that truth telling is painful, right? And so he talks about clean pain in his book, My Grandmother's Hands, being, saying the thing or doing the thing you need to say or do, even though it's super uncomfortable and painful and awkward. And then, right, helping us move toward healing. Dirty pain, on the other hand, is this blame, shame, avoidance, distancing. That's not me, right? Which ultimately, perpetuates the harm, racial inequity, racial injustice, racial trauma. And we bury it, right? And it ends up coming out sideways in other ways. When we bury our pain, it comes out, but we just take it out on each other. We take it out on our loved ones. We take it out on ourselves. So it's there, whether we acknowledge it or not, it is there. And I think that can, especially with racial justice work, is just so critical to hold space in yourself, your body, regardless of your experience in the world, to feel the reality of what you're feeling, to slow down, and to move through the clean pain of like acknowledgement. And perhaps a conversation comes out of that, maybe not, but just with yourself, right? Getting clear about your own truth in that moment, in that situation, so that you can do the next right thing, right? So I think that's a powerful framework as well.
So in your chapter, you talk about, and this is, I think, the term that we would use for some of the things you're talking about is restorative dialogue. And so what makes, talk a little bit more about what would make the dialogue restorative.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think, I think the spirit with which we enter into a dialogue matters. You talk about this in your work, Mary Frances, of bold, inclusive conversations. Like, so much of restorative dialogue happens with ourselves first, getting clear about our needs, traumas, preferences, and then entering into dialogue with curiosity, right? Dialogue instead of debate. It's another, language that we use at the Winners Group. And so, yeah, just going in with curiosity. It might be really scary. You might be shaking. Your heart might be pounding out of your chest. I've had these experiences, but it's restorative because you're restoring, an element of a relationship. You're going into it with the hope of something being generative, something being transformative, right? Being transformed. Yeah. And so that would be the hope, as opposed to having our walls up, or, I'm going to one up you right now. I'm going to outwoke you right now. I'm going to use language you don't even understand. I'm going to out intellectualize you. I'm going to tell you what you need to hear so you can change and learn and grow. Like, no, I mean, there's a lot of that in this work. Maybe that's effective for some folks, but what I have found to be more effective is that curiosity and that clarity of like, hey, I might be making up this story in my head about what's going on. Can you help me understand like where you're coming from? And you may come to resolution and you may not, but I think so much of it is about your goal for the conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. In terms of restorative, and it's about you trying to restore the relationship. I think there's so much polarization in our world today, right? Where people just dig in. This is my opinion, and this is your opinion, and never we just cannot come together. But and you mentioned the goal of the conversation, as well. What are we trying to achieve here? And if we're trying to achieve a win-lose, in debate, well, then it's gonna go one way. But if we are trying to restore the relationship or preserve the relationship or come to a greater understanding or be curious, it's just so important to understand, what that goal is. I'm reminded of a situation that I had recently, and it was in a session. I was the presenter at the session. It was a virtual session, and we were doing a they called it a dress rehearsal for the session. And the person who would be introducing me and the convener of this session kept calling me Mary, and my name is Mary Frances. And so I corrected her once, and I said, it's Mary Frances. And she kind of blew it off. She says, okay. And then she called me Mary again, and I didn't say anything. And then the third time, I took the opportunity. There's something that we sometimes talk about too, is kind of about the ouch and educate. So on the third time, I said, I really, I know that we don't have a lot of time in our, we're getting ready for the session, and I know that you're going to be introducing me, and I just want to make sure that you know that, and that you heard me say that my name is Mary Frances, not Mary. And it was in a big group. Well, not a big group. There were about 10 people there, and I didn't want to have an awkward, I'm the speaker, I didn't want to have an awkward, situation. So, and I don't know that I restored. The thing is, Rochelle, Gabby, I don't know if I restored the relationship because I don't know her really, except in this context. So do you have any advice for in the moment kinds of situations where it might not be as comfortable calling someone out in the moment because of the context.
Absolutely. Well, what stands out to me about that story, Mary Frances, is that you were crystal clear about your need in that moment, right? Like you were clear with yourself. Like, my name is Mary Frances. And you've experienced this likely many, 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 many times, right? So it's not like this is a one-off sort of out of nowhere. This happens from what I've heard you share, right? Like in a recurring basis. So for you, you know, you had a clear preference, you had shared it, you didn't have a lot of time, you let her know multiple times. And I think I've come to realize, at least the more I've been doing this work, like to be at peace with certain relationships being transactional. Like I'm not trying to be in relationship with the person introducing me for a session. I'll be kind. I'll tell the truth. I'll be respectful. I will do the thing I came to do. Right. And the nature of that relationship is more transactional, and that's fine. That's cool. Like we don't have to be best friends, but we have to have regard for each other's humanity. And so when I'm feeling erased, when I'm feeling like I made a request, you invited me to do this thing, and now that's being violated, I need to say something, right? And so maybe, right, so in the moment, you did what you did to share your preference, whether that's honored or not is on that other person. And then you've got, right, choices to make about in that moment. It's often split second, like,
right,
which will also impact the energy you're bringing to, you know, whatever you're doing, the keynote, the session, the group then may, you know, there's vibes that we can touch into that aren't tangible. But it's like, again, that inner source of like, all right, so-and-so didn't respect it this time. Like that's painful. And this happens all the time. And I'm here to do a thing. Where can I move through this? Focus on what I'm here to do, right? And maybe a conversation happens later. Maybe it's a follow-up email, like making it right, giving that person an opportunity to make it right. But also like people don't have time for that. And you may not have energy for that. And you're doing a million things. So like maybe it's on to the next thing, and sort of good information to have for next time working with that particular person. You know?
That's so key, right? We have to know inside of ourselves what's going to make it right for me.
Yeah.
Kind of like almost regardless of what's going on with that other person. Yeah. I'm sorry, Gabby, you were going to.
Oh, I was just going to say that you took care of yourself. And in hindsight, for me, I know that I always feel better when I speak up for myself than when I don't. So I feel like.
But that could be different for different people too, right? Sure. I mean, I think that I think we have to allow that for some people, it may not be worth it to speak up for themselves in that kind of a situation because they are protecting their well-being. Because I know for me, even to bring it up was stressful. It caused, it created an emotion, right? Because, okay, now I have to bring this up and I'm getting ready to give this talk. But it was important for me when she introduced me, not to introduce me as Mary, right? And so that's why it was so important in that particular context. Perhaps in another context, if I was just in the meeting with them and I wasn't the keynote, speaker, it may not have been. And so I think what I'm hearing is that we have to look at things are situational, but to have the tools and the skills to know how to respond, like having a methodology, open the door, I observed, right? This is what I'm thinking, right? So it helps us to have a framework to put around something, because we never know when something's going to come up, when we're going to need to have, a conversation, and we want to have a conversation. So that's what you do so beautifully in the chapter, giving people tools.
Yeah, thank you. And I've seen them modeled, which is why I believe in them. I've seen it done, and it's rare, but I think Mary Frances, with the work you do with our team, and I see you do this all the time. I've worked with other colleagues who do it, and I try to practice it. I think I have so much to learn, and so easy to talk about it, another to put it into practice.
Oh yes. And that's the key, practice, right? Because we do have to practice. If we don't practice, it's not going to become a habit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it comes back to this truth-telling idea. I'm trying this out actually this week. So I'm trying it out. Just telling the truth. It's sort of fun with my husband. We've been talking about like, okay, with little things, even preferences around what to watch on TV, preferences, but it requires me pausing in every moment, every choice point, which there are millions every day, to just like take a minute, take a beat. Like, what do I actually want? Like, what do I want to eat tonight for real? What, instead of just the people pleasing, like, you decide. And so there are these 1 degree turns, she calls them. And I think with racial justice, like tying it back to a work setting and using these tools, ultimately it's about truth telling in small ways, whether it's a preference about when to have a meeting, whether it's a preference about, hey, like I'm really, introverted and maybe there's racial dynamics at play as well, and power dynamics where I'm needing a little time and space from a thing. Maybe I need, perhaps you're neurodivergent. Like there's so many intersections with truth telling and 1 degree turns. And so again, that might be met with receptivity, and it might be met with like, sorry, not today. And that's okay. And so having those skills to hear however someone might respond to your truth is important.
Yeah, that's hard. But then in the end, it sounds like being able to tell the truth allows you to really just show up as yourself, which eventually will lead to some ease, I would hope, because you're not spending so much effort trying to edit yourself or try to edit what you say.
Yeah. And like integrity, right? That's like this idea of I'm aligned, my insides and my outsides match. When we're conflicted internally and say a thing we don't mean or isn't true for us, like it makes us physically sick. Like I have experienced that kind of stress. So
do you think there are some boundaries though? I mean, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Because what about when you know that if you tell the absolute truth, it's going to do harm to someone else, it's going to hurt someone else? So I know that I sometimes edit because I don't want to, and I think about what is the cost to me for not being absolutely open and truthful, and what is the cost to the other person. And so if I think that the cost to the other person is going to be greater than the cost to me, then I might not tell the whole truth. Are we getting very philosophical here?
Well, yeah, I love this kind of stuff. I mean, I think that there's a strategy with right? You could be strategic about your truth telling. I think the idea with this is you're not, you don't just say whatever you think at any given moment, but recognizing sometimes that, omissions of truth. What is that like when you're silent about something? That also could mean that you're not in your full integrity or telling the truth, right? And so, but being strategic, right? And recognizing like someone else's journey toward healing is their choice. So sparing someone's short-term feelings for long-term, like maybe peace. I don't know that's, I wonder, I have a curiosity about it, because is it really peace, or is it, again, a thing that might come out later in a different way, And
then it's cultural too, because you know about peace over truth, right? That there are some cultures that go for peace over truth. That's what's, taught to them. So this is all very complex.
Yeah, totally. And I never want to like moralize or say one way is better than another necessarily too. It's more kind of what I'm experimenting with in this phase of my life. And I could, might change my mind, next year, next month. But it's again, a tool I think that is helping me move toward that inner clarity. And Gabby, like you mentioned, that more ease in the day-to-day.
I like the ease. Although now I'm wondering, I'm like, what has Mary Frances not told me?
Spare your feelings, right? We can talk later. No, I'm only kidding.
That's the thing. But the thing is, like, if I could just say, you know, Mary Frances, like, there have been so many moments you just say the thing, and maybe short term it's a little uncomfortable. Like, yeah, I got to sit with that. Or even if it's something where like we're not in agreement per se, I have a respect and a deep admiration for the way you tell the truth, like with our team. So because I don't have to wonder, like, I think the wondering and the making up stories in my head causes more suffering, causes more spiraling, and like, oh, what do I need to do to, you know, I don't know, be in good regard. But I feel like you kind of just, it's helpful. I think your leadership style, for me at least, is helpful.
No, same. It pushes us to grow, I think.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Very grateful for you.
Maybe I should hear more about it, because I'm not sure what it is specifically. We'll talk later. We will talk later.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Well, Rochelle, thank you so much for joining us. And, you know, this conversation has been deep and wonderful and grounding. But through it all, this, you know, we've all acknowledged at some point that this is exhausting work, fatiguing. And I believe we talked about this before, but I'm sure you have more to share about this. Like, how do you fill your cup to keep this work sustainable for you?
Yeah, I think there's, for me, I've been moving toward, how do I say that? Like, I don't take it as seriously maybe as I used to. I think I shared this in our last conversation. Like, I'm coming from a place of taking so much of the world on, kind of taking the weight of the world on my back, and recognizing that actually doesn't help me be effective. So I think I'm just learning where to like release and not be the one to maybe work on a particular issue or work on a particular, I don't know, like, it's hard to explain. I think I'm moving more inward as opposed to outward. Like, I enjoy the work I do in the world. Like, I feel so lucky to be doing this work with this team specifically, and having the chance to speak and write and educate and create transformational experiences for people. But what I'm really invested in at this phase in my life is more of that inner work, and recognizing and noticing how it shapes the way I show up. Because I've for so long shown up in a way that's coming from a place of saviorism, or coming from a place of like needing to save the world, so to speak. But it wasn't super useful. In fact, I think it was detrimental, like for the movements toward justice, for even my own just sense of well-being. So I think I'm learning like where I really want to put energy and like lend voice, and where I'm hanging back and recognizing like, that's not my work. That's cool. That's fine. Like, I think there's a lot of good people, a lot of incredibly talented, brilliant humans, like doing good in the world. And I can learn so much from them and support, but maybe from back here, you know? So yeah, maybe taking more of a back seat in certain things is helpful. And then just like on the lighter side, I spend time with my kids. I find time for play and music, and I host karaoke nights with friends. I make good food. Yeah, just I get outside. Nature is important to me. Just remembering the cycles of growth and the seasons. Living in Minnesota, especially, is important to be outside all year long. So yeah, lightness and play is another one.
I just want to say I am always so humbled and inspired by your humility. It always comes across. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
This has been an incredible conversation, and I love the play part. And your girls are so incredibly cute. They are fortunate to have you as a mom, and just be well and continue to shine, because you truly do. And we learn so much from you about mindfulness and about the pause and about, you know, breathing and getting clear on what your work is to do and what your work is not to do. I think that's so important for everybody to know. I have my pastor says, everybody can't do everything, but everybody can do something, and finding out what that something is so key. So thank you both for being here, and thank you, Gabby, for continuing to co-host this series. And until next time, continue to reimagine racial justice at work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.